Great. Let me invite on stage Tunde. So we'll get straight into our program. For this first session, welcome Tunde again.
Thank
you. We are going to have Moctar and Tunde sharing on the two important issues. Moctar will give us the African landscape or privacy landscape in Africa, the concerns, the issues. After that, Tunde will also talk about the issues related to digital ID in Africa. So I'll hand over to you, Moctar.
So, good morning, everybody. In waiting for Jamal to allow me to show few slides. Actually, my target is not really to make a presentation as per se. I want to be a little bit provocative on what we think in terms of privacy. Most of the time, people, specifically on this setup, you go and you prepare nice slides with nice pictures and nice terminologies, and you upload and everything is fine. But the substance itself, the problematic of the issues that we try to address, because we want it to be politically correct, because you don't want to recognize a few things that is happening in our house, and we just this, or maybe we are afraid of facing them. Specifically when matter come in privacies, in our countries, in our setups, in probably the concept of that privacy is not the same for us as an African. And I explain myself. We get used to live in a compound, what we call a common houses. We have living in a concept of, how can I say, ethnicity, weakness of the systems in which we are living. We rely mainly on the community, in our community, in terms of how we're going to survive if something happens. The tribe, the region, the ethnicity, or the big family will come and support you. If you are sick or you are there is no insurance probably you have getting or something. Grow up in the concept of having what we call open life. If you try to lock your door, the people will say, oh, this is a white way of doing things or a westernized way of doing things. So you have to be open to society. Everybody can come to in your private life and start to or what kind of, behavior, or even how you dress yourself or how you speak. Because once you speak, you represent our community, and since you represent our community, you need to be very nice and so on. So that concept of common, shared, living in compound. By the way, in Europe and United States, it was like that 3-4 centuries ago. I mean, people living in a compound and everything is shared, people living in the concept of tribes, regions. That's why they had many wars back there. Now, we live now in a context whereby not only we haven't moved from what we call the ethnic state regions, non-nation state to nation state. And the fact that you live in a non-nation state or not a fully nation state make the privacy really conditional in terms of definition. for instance, if your culture is not to invade privacy of people, if your culture is not to let anybody invade your privacy, your reaction to the definition of privacy is different from when you are allowing everybody to do whatever they want to do. Sometimes some decisions are taken by the authorities, and the authorities could be the chief of tribe, or could be the president or prime minister or the chief of the region, by saying that we need to behave a certain way rather than a certain way. Like in China, for instance, people find very normal the facial recognition. It's normal because it's a definition of good citizen. By looking at the person who is crossing at the red light or throwing a butt when he's smoking or throwing or littering here and there, the government think for the good of the people, that person need to be facially recognized. And once that person is facially recognized, all services that will be provided to him are subject to his good behavior. He's a bad citizen because he's throwing butts, smokes in the street, throwing butts there, or crossing the road, making people's life in danger, and so on. And hence, when he comes for a service, renewing his driver's license or something, he would be charged premium. So people find that normal. Or, for the good of people, if you put detector or sensor in the school uniform to make sure that you are controlling the students, if they are coming to school or not, that's normal. But in the United States, for instance, or in Europe, this is outrageous. You are the only one who understands that soapbox things. Soapbox used to be people who wanted to go in the street and say, they took the soapbox, stand up on it, and start, shouting. Somebody can just stand up and say, oh, it's good to put that detector, the sensor on the uniform of the people, so we can know how our students are good. Are they coming to school? Time he will be accessing your election file and say, oh, he is from that tribe, he will not vote for me. Don't give him his right to vote. He's from that ethnicity, you need to kill him. And it happened. Accessing, once you allow somebody to enter part of your private life, he will invade the rest of your life. But that concept here still, because of our political system, we don't know how anonymous we are. By the way, Google knows what you are looking for. Facebook knows what you like. The CIA knows how your TV, smartphone to spy on you. Your communications are being monitored somehow, specifically in your country, or you are targeted 24 hours. You are being manipulated, and you don't realize that, by the news, fake news or non-fake news, or pretended to be fake news or pretend to be real news, every single day. Your opinion on everything is being formed by somebody external, not you. You don't have that right of select. Because privacy definition sometimes is the right to select the boundary of what you show or not to show, not to accept or not to accept at all. So that landscape in Africa is the thing that has justified a lot of things, because the systems don't have that culture of privacy. The systems have not put in place rules, and if they and then now you can use it. Otherwise, everybody can using devices to do this and that. Now, all this is about data. Data was just something we use for mathematical equations to do something. Then we transform it as something as an information. And from information, we really transform it into knowledge. And then since the Economist last 2 years ago titled The New Oil of the Digital World, which is actually data, it's become a resource. And now it is a weapon. And this is where we have a problem. In the African context, we are all adopting technology. Somebody was speaking about IoTs being used and even killing people and so on. We are jumping into adopting new technologies without taking the appropriate measure for that. If we stay behind, we say, oh, we are missing the turn of the fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution, the digital transformation, and so on. But in the same time, if we adopt them, we are just opening the door for what we call, and I will call, the digital dominance. Now, digital dominance is very different from digital colonization, because colonization you can fight and there is a decolonization for that. But when you start dominance, digital dominance, in fact, all your data and yourself are being controlled, and it's forever. You cannot get out of it. Your habits, your profiling, what you have done and what you're going to do, all of that is over there. So what are we doing in Africa? Almost nothing. Almost nothing in the sense that this dialectic problematic, this concept of really understanding the privacy and being bound by it, because I cannot offer to you something I don't have. I cannot teach you something I didn't know. If I hadn't known about privacy, if I didn't grow up in the culture of privacy, if I don't know anything, how will I respect any documents that has been copied, pasted in ways from the Western kind of way of doing things by putting it in my constitutions or adopting what we call Glassy Plus or Convention A and Z and Y and Z. Have that, copy it as part of my constitution, put it in my whatever constitution laws and so on, but I am not believing on it because I don't know it. I didn't grow in it. I don't understand it. And I cannot give it to you. I cannot respect your right if I don't know how I respect my own rights. I cannot give you privacy if I don't understand what is privacy for me. And this is the problematic we do have. I am sorry to be politically incorrect, but this is the way. We have a very nice constitution that how many times you have somebody complaining about his privacy and going to the organ and the organ gives them satisfactory. Give me one example in Africa, for instance. None. How can you make sure that those people who are collecting your data are really using them for the good? This is the real problem that we need to address somehow. And addressing that is meaning believing on that ourselves, putting the right document there, the right structures, and being able to stand by them. Because if you don't stand by them, why do you have to put them? I don't know if you remember, that will be a long story. I want to go there. If you do something and you are not using, so why are you doing it? If this doesn't bring you happiness or doesn't solve your problem, why are you doing it? We have a nice laws. The African Union has the Court of Human Rights, International Court of Justice, but they are sitting, nobody's come to them. Why? The texts are very well, the structures are very well, the concept are very good, but simply there is no one standing up and said, oh, this is my right today, and there is some people, some judges sitting there, hopefully not corrupted judges, not working with the government, and I come to them and complain about this. So this is where we need probably to focus on with regard to the privacy. Now, coming back to the mechanics, the EU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, the first one actually that links security and personal data protection. You cannot find anywhere in the world a convention that links the two. So when Robin and I will come after, we'll be talking about the background. Why did we do that? How come we did that? It talks about the privacy is mentioned more than 7 times, from data processing to how to collect the data and et cetera, all of the kind of things. We have provided guidelines based on this in collaboration with ISOC last year with regard to PDP. We are supporting many of the agencies that are supposed to be the personal data protection agencies. We are supporting the network of that. But again, all that's still into the mechanics that will be actually happening soon. The preamble is stressing on the privacy for citizens. It's concerned about the freedom and privacy. It is considering the combating violation of privacy and so on. Chapter 2 on the personal data protection takes about the privacy also. I'm just jumping over. In 2015, we made a survey in collaboration with, in the framework of the Global Forum for Cybersecurity Expertise, State Departments, and Symantec. We did a review of what is happening in Africa. And as part of the background, we have found out that 30% of our countries are still illiterate, barely read something. Most of the privacy policy and term services for web and mobile application are in English or French, except for M-Pesa. Less than 10% of us who can actually read them before we provide our consent. Have you ever read the whole privacy when Google asks you, or Yahoo, or you never read them? You are in rush, you want that damn email to be there, and you just click, yes, I agree. Anything is brought in front of you, we just I agree. And by the way, if you don't agree, so what? Yeah, no service. I try to do that. I say, no, I don't accept. And I say, so go back. Because sometimes when you think free services are the worst thing can happen to you, those institutions, Facebook, whatever, are built upon gratuity. And gratuity is very attractive. And if you think you are getting something for free, don't think that you are a customer, you are the product. You are being sold every time, everywhere. Right? Now, how do you have a 30% of our population who cannot read and you want them to have privacy? They can't even read the Constitution itself. So this is a problem. Transforming those documents into something readable, usable by people is something probably we need to address. Now comes the GDPR issue. You understand about that. The survey in 2015 tells us that only 8 countries do have national cybersecurity strategy. And by the way, I was last week in The Hague on the meeting of the GFCE. The picture didn't change much. It's 1 or 2, plus. National CERT, only 13. Personal Data Protection Law, 14. Cyber laws, between 11 and 12. Awareness campaign, education on cybersecurity, 13. So this is the situation in Africa. So summarize, we don't have yet laws, if you talk about mechanics. The problematic is not well understood. We are rushing adopting technologies without putting the safeguards in terms of cybersecurity. And hence, we are being invaded by many objects or imposed to us or sold to us, and there is no standard for them, and we don't know how to address them simply because we have no choice or we don't know how to read things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moctar, for the interesting and important reflections. Okay, so I see there's a burning hand, so I'll just get you and then we'll move on to Tunde. Please go ahead. No, okay. I didn't want to open this as yes, that's
okay. Thank you very much. Let me know from Watra. So thank you, Moctar, for your presentation. You said you have been saying that there's no standard. Is there any plan at AUC level to put in place standards and
no, sir.
maybe approval?
Simply stated, no, sir. To be honest with you, no, sir, and no, and no. Simply because it's not only our problem; it's a global problem of the world. This is a reflection. This within the framework of digital cooperation. People are thinking that probably we need to do so because the issue of how we have open eyes for everybody. Some people are supporting, some countries are supporting the United States, Australia, New Zealand kind of things. UK is already advanced on implementing the 5G, and now they have to go back to support what the United States is saying. The United States hasn't put any proof. There is no proof. The Chinese are very aggressive within the continent. 75% of the equipment we have in Africa are Huawei equipment, Chinese equipment. So what are we going to do? We're going to throw all that because of the spying and then get something while we don't have proof? Now, this is where people are thinking, why don't we just have a certain code of conduct, have a clearinghouse, some sort, United Nations kind of clearinghouse, to see how all these devices should be certified before going into the market, so we need to make sure they are not killing us. But it's still, it's open, it's a wide open for discussion.
Thank you, Moctar. Good idea for Africa, Tunde.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tunde Fafunwa. I'm the lead advisor for the Digital Center of Excellence at the Economic Commission for Africa. It's my pleasure to be here today. So into the excellent environment that my colleague and friend Moctar has covered, and the challenging and somewhat chaotic landscape of privacy and personal data protection, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ECA's collaboration also with the AUC on good digital ID and the work that the center is doing, as well as good digital ID and its relationship to privacy. So I don't have any slides, so you're going to have to listen to my voice carefully. Thank you. All right. The Digital Center of Excellence is a very new initiative or institution that came out of some work that the ECA did with the African Union. And it was a recognition of some of the gaps that we have on the continent in digital, as many of you are aware of, and again have been covered earlier on. One of the initial initiatives was a decision to focus on digital ID. Why? Well, you may or you may not have seen some figures about how many Africans have an ID or how many don't. These were figures that came from the World Bank. There's a global number of over 1 billion people don't have any form of ID, and perhaps 500 million are within the African continent. Now, that generated some controversy, probably some good controversy. I have spoken to the group in the World Bank that developed the number, and it's clearly an estimate, it's a projection, and it was to get a conversation going, which it certainly has done. Some countries dispute some of the individual figures. However, the overall scale of the problem is not really in question. A significant number of us simply don't have IDs in Africa. Now, what does that mean if you don't have an ID? Well, you know, in some cases, in some local communities, it might not be a big deal, depending on the scale of activities. But for the most part, not having identification is a very serious issue because you have no way of identifying yourself. You have no way of participating in social and economic activities. In many cases, you won't be eligible for government programs or funding or benefits, etc. Clearly, as we are here in the internet society, without having some form of ID, you can't participate in the digital economy and the global environment. The UN has also identified the ability to identify yourself as a human right. And there is work being done to define what a legal ID would be. But the underlying concept is that each person should have a right to an identity and an ability to identify themselves. So the ECA, along with the AUC and with significant support from the Omidyar network, helped to fund and create this center and to start work on a digital ID. Now, one of the first things that was needed was to define what would be the principles or framework for a good digital ID. And while there'll be some more discussion on this, I'm going to limit some of my comments to a few of the principles and then talk briefly about privacy. So the idea of a good digital ID covered a lot of things that you would probably expect: governance, ownership, security, interoperability, and so on. Of course, security and privacy were there. But one of the key aspects that was highlighted is the principle of inclusivity. The idea was that we should not create a digital ID that continued to leave significant members of the population behind. As Moctar mentioned, you know, 33% literacy in terms of certain languages, certainly English and French. So we want to make sure that we don't increase the digital divide, but rather narrow or eliminate it. The challenge is, how do we use technology to ensure that everybody is included? Now, once you start thinking through that problem, you get to certain challenges, including political challenges. As my friend Moctar has opened the arena of being not necessarily politically correct or to be challenging, I will continue in that vein. So we can have a principle that says nobody should be left behind, everybody should be inclusive. But from a political perspective, from a government perspective, if you're going to do an ID, you're usually going to do a what? Well, you'll do a national ID, wouldn't you? Yes, that seems normal and obvious. You want to identify citizens, etc. But the fact is that large numbers of citizens in certain countries don't have any kind of proper documentation or credentials to show that they're citizens. They've simply lived in that area or on that land, or migrated, or they're nomads, and for scores or decades of years, if not centuries and multiple generations, they've lived in that area. So to some extent, almost by definition, a national ID is exclusive. It's not inclusive. It doesn't include everybody. So we are very keen on supporting efforts as part of the Good Digital ID that includes everyone, that says everyone has a right to an identity. That identity doesn't necessarily give them a right to citizenship. That may be layered on later. It doesn't necessarily give them or give anyone a right to residency within the country. But at least establishing an identity gives somebody that right. It gives them that respect. It gives them the ability to participate more fully in the economic and social arena. and contribute both to their own lives and their family and the community. So in that regard, of course, then comes the issue of privacy. How do you maintain privacy? One of the things I might suggest to you, and it's been demonstrated in India, where they used a completely biometric process to identify people, and they registered more than 1 billion people, because they were not necessarily citizens, using biometrics, fingerprints and iris scans. And the idea was identity first. So create something where at least each person would have a unique identity and therefore could participate in social and economic and financial activities. But that identity didn't necessarily give them citizenship. It didn't even necessarily give them residency, because in order to do that, you'd have to present additional documents. But by starting with the approach of identity first, they ended up with a very inclusive approach to identity. There are, of course, privacy concerns. Sometimes you think, okay, with biometrics, there's less privacy. But interestingly enough, compared to some of the Western systems where every time an identity is given, it includes details of the person's full name, address, perhaps birth date, certainly, and a lot of personal information. A biometric system could simply say, let's say you were stopped, you're driving, and you want to, the police person wants to know whether you're authorized to drive or not. Put your thumbprint, and it queries the database, and it either says you have a valid driver's license or you don't. No other personal information might be given. So I think there are new ways of thinking about how to ensure that people have an identity and can participate and have rights, and at the same time address some of the privacy issues that have been mentioned. Again, many of these are still open challenges for discussion. My final comment would be that as part of the Digital Center of Excellence, one of our foundational layers is collaboration. We very much believe that the only way to address some of these key challenges and problems is by working together. And certainly we have started to demonstrate that with our partnership, very close working relationship with the AUC, and of course with the support of Omidyar Networks and others. So we very much welcome working with the Internet Society. We very much believe that we're stronger together, and that the challenges that we face are significant. So we all need to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tunde. David has some reflections on this.
Thank you very much, Tunde and Moctar. I think you gave us a lot of food for thought for today. We have been working at the Internet Society on privacy for quite a while. And I remember, I think it's about 10 years ago that we had our first workshop with the UNECA. And then we developed the privacy guidelines with the African Union. And I'm very happy that today we have been able to organize this workshop, which is, if I may say, the first that deals with a concrete project. So we have in front of us the digital ID that will be implemented in Africa soon. And I think we are confronted with a real application of privacy today. As Moctar said, privacy is probably the most misunderstood issue in Africa, because we don't value privacy. We are people who believe that we care about the other person, and privacy is maybe something that tells us, you have a border, I shouldn't worry, I shouldn't be concerned about Berenga. And this is, for some cultures, is not acceptable. But now we are living in a world that is changing. And whether we like it or not, privacy has some, not having privacy has big impacts. So I think we have to change the way we live, because the world is, the way we think about the world. With regards to privacy and digital ID, I have to share I have to share my personal experience with ID. So in Ethiopia, in ID, on your ID, you have to give your ethnicity. So when I wanted to renew my ID card, I was asked my ethnic identity. I said, I don't have one. They told me, you will not get an ID if you don't give an ethnic group. So I refused, and the only solution that I have found is to create a fake ethnic identity. So I just invented one because I was against having ethnicity in my ID, because it can be used for things that I cannot imagine. In Rwanda, we are celebrating the end. Well, I don't know if we can say celebrating, but commemorating the end of 25 years of the genocide. They use the ID cards to select the people they are killing. Okay, so having my ethnic identity on my ID card can be used against me, to kill me, just because I am from one ethnic background. So, and unfortunately, there are too many people today with their ethnic identity on their ID card. It was bad when it was on paper. It will be even worse when it will be on a database where someone can just select people from one ethnic background to go and kill them. So it's no more theory. It is in practice. So I think it is very, very important that today we discuss what is acceptable to be on our digital ID. Because it can be a question of who is going to be killed and not. Okay, so I'm very happy that we co-organize this meeting. I hope that we will debate on what should be in, what is acceptable to be in the digital ID that is going to be implemented in Africa, and maybe that will help us, make sure that we don't do mistakes, because if we do a mistake, there might not be possibility to turn around. So I hope that this workshop will contribute to making sure that we go in the right direction while implementing digital ID in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I'm going to open the floor for some questions to Moctar and Tunde. Please make your question very concise and straight to the point, and not another presentation. So I'll get the first. I'll start from this side. So I'll start with the lady. I'll come to you, my colleague from Kenya, and then end with Robin.
Morning, everyone. My name is Burhan. I work for Access Now. I'm normally based out of Nairobi. So my question is for the two gentlemen over there that gave us a very interesting presentation. So Moctar, I really want to challenge on the concept that we don't see privacy as Africans. As a community, we have a lot of things that are a taboo. For instance, as a woman, if I've done abortion, I don't want people to know that I've done abortion. So I would want that part of my privacy to be protected, right? And then the assumption that, you know, society continuously tells us what to wear and everything else doesn't necessarily mean that we don't appreciate privacy. So I think that assumption could be a bit dangerous, especially coming from someone that works at the AU and is supposed to be safeguarding our privacy. That's one. And number two, I really want to ask how the UNECA, who did you guys consult with to sort of get to this stage to say that everybody needs a digital ID? So for instance, in this room, if I would ask how many people have different forms of identification, I have 2 forms of identification. Many in India, before the Aadhaar was rolled out, had at least 1 or 2 forms of identification before Aadhaar came in. So this assumption that 500 million people in this continent don't have identification, you said is an estimate. So basing a policy based on an estimate that the World Bank made is a bit scary to me. So that's one comment. So my other question is, who was consulted? What other civil society organizations were consulted? What national bodies were consulted before you guys decided that we all needed digital IDs? One, and two, because you were talking about how privacy is going to be an issue, but have you guys considered all of the stuff that has happened in India with Aadhaar and all of the people that have been excluded from getting services from the government because of Aadhaar? And also, I really also want to understand what is the interest of the EU when it comes to this and immigration, and the fact that they want African governments to be able to identify their citizens, that they also really play a really important role in this. And I don't think we're being very clear or honest in some of the vendor interest and some of the other government interest, and the mass surveillance capacity as well. And just one really last comment is that I think of my friend from Zimbabwe here, and the Ethiopians can also attest, we are a very highly surveilled state. So if you go to any kabale in Ethiopia, the government knows who lives in what specific house. So if you're telling me that the government can't identify Ethiopians as citizens or Ethiopians as individuals, is very difficult for me. It's very hard to believe that, because we know how surveillance states work. So when you come and tell me that governments need to identify their citizens, they already know, like in the Ethiopian and Zimbabwean context, many times government knows who their citizens are. So it's this idea that they can't, it's based on a lot of assumption, then it's very difficult to get the policy or the background work that has been done on this to inform this really critical policy that you guys are unfolding. So I would like that to be answered. Thanks.
My name is, good morning, Wainana Mungai from Kenya. My question is also very much in line with our the previous speaker's first question about certain statements that have been made that I'm not too sure whether they're based on research. I understand it's politically incorrect, you clarified, but I wonder whether the political incorrectness is based on actual research, because I don't take it very kindly that it's assumed that Africans, uniquely Africans, do not have an appreciation for privacy, because, well, the experience in Kenya, for instance, is in Kenya in the 50s, survived simply because of the level of privacy that the community could maintain, and individuals could do that. And if it is, and the other aspect to it is the fact that even if there is no appreciation of the concept of privacy, where do we say that that is uniquely African? Because if you look around the world in other communities, you'll find very much the same dynamics, as you may use as anecdotes, as examples of cases where privacy is not appreciated in Africa. You will find them across the world. If it is surveillance, it's going on today, every country in the world. And that is why we're addressing it as a global problem. So I'd really like to see the study that makes it uniquely African. Secondly, it's the issue of, I think, Tunde mentioned literacy in the sense of 30% literacy, if you take it in terms of French and English. I don't believe in 2019 we should continue to define our literacy on the basis of foreign languages. Just a response. And lastly, for Dawit, sorry to also be politically quite incorrect, on the issue of ethnicity, I don't think there is something majorly, intrinsically wrong about our ethnicity. It's a reality. And if you look at countries such as, and I've had the same response from people who live in Nordic countries, if it is Denmark, Finland, Sweden, these guys are different. They have borders, but they can't live with each other because they are also different. So ethnicity is a reality across the world. It's not unique to Africa. And I don't think it's an African problem, except where it is used to harm, which also is nothing African. It happens in Asia at the moment. It's happening with the kind of discrimination you see across the world. So I think we need to, yes, say there's a differentiation, but I don't think some of the things we claim to be uniquely African are uniquely African, or if they are uniquely African, they are just different and not necessarily inferior. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'm Serge Parfait from Congo.
Au vu de...
Well, given the volume of questions that have been answered, let's address the concerns raised before we continue to take some.
Let me shoot first. First of all, I don't recall, and if I did so, that Africans don't appreciate privacy. If that was slipped from my tongue or whatever it is, I didn't mean to say that. That's number one, so make it clear there. Second, what I was actually implying to say, I said that the privacy definition is relative to the culture and to the boundary and to the geography. What is acceptable as a privacy somewhere may be not acceptable as privacy somewhere else. If we go by the norm of Western definitions of those privacy things, probably somebody may say that Africans do not comply to what that definition, that's what I meant by that things. Now, if you go by imposing to us that one, then probably we are not complying with any kind of definition really of privacy. The issue of abortion could be in the United States something really, really very private. But in the village here, the whole village will be talking about it, and it doesn't create any problem at all. So that's why I wanted to make sure that what is acceptable to you here in your village, because your tanti, your etc., all of them will be speaking about it everywhere in the village, and it is normal. Nothing wrong with it. While if you had to speak it somewhere else, it's really, really a problem, and you can go and complain about it. Now, there is no research to the second question. There is no research based on that, and there is no document that is based on my own specific experience of the last 15 years dealing with these kind of things. And I have seen it everywhere in different countries and different situations. Yes, you are right that nothing is wrong with ethnicity. But if we had to go by what we call today the global war, the universal civilization, that concept does exist. And we are all moving from state ethnic to state nations. Then the ethnicity is wrong. Specifically, as you said, if it is meant to be used as a way of selection, like Pavlov did with his genetics. When you use it to kill people, when you use them to not give them right to benefit from the whole things, when you deny them a lot of things, then it is wrong. Do we have to accept ethnicity as something that part of our African culture and proud of it and heritage and our elders and fathers and mothers and everything saying that it's good to be belong to that tribe because that tribe was something good? And as I said, because also it's provide me security in the absence of real institutions that give me my right. That's a good place to be. I feel very comfortable. It's a comfort zone for me. Do we want that to happen? Yes, probably yes. Every country can say and every individual can say yes or no. But bottom line, it doesn't comply really with the universal definition of everybody being equal and have their own rights. Is most of the time is not compatible with that. If you lead the country because you are in tribe Z and you think that your tribe Z is the one who should always lead this country, then it's wrong. If you use it because you want those people like in Rwanda don't have right to exist there, it's wrong. So to avoid that probably, and I'm saying probably again, to avoid that probably we need to all move to the nation state rather than ethnic states. And most of that now I'm coming to research and definition and I can tell them all to you. Every single books and definition when they come to the poverty explanation and underdevelopment, most of the time the concept of state, nation, and ethnicity, state ethnic plays a fundamental roles. Because all the potential of the country has not really given the right to create, to innovate, to express themselves. That based now scientific discussion. Now, we don't have to make it a dialogue. If you want, we can go have a coffee outside and talk about it for 1,000 hours, and I'm willing to do so. It's just nothing, again, my repetition is this, ce qui est bon.
What is good for the gander is not necessarily good for the goose. And so the definition of a private life is a concept that is relative. However, we have to align it with what we refer to as universal civilization if we want to be part of the world. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for the question. So I think one of the first questions was, what is the basis of the good digital ID principles and who has been consulted? Very wide range of consultation occurred. The principles of good ID were also built upon previous principles as put forward by a wide range of NGOs and UN organizations, including UNICEF and UNHCR. I would invite you to look at the principles and would be very interested in your input, or if you had any concerns about the underlying principle of the right of a person to identify themselves. And I think it's very important in these very good debates to look at the fundamentals, as you said, and say, okay, can we agree on that? Can we agree that it is a right of a person to be able to identify
And it is those who produce the greater content can be able to impose their own civilization over the rest of the world. De facto, whether we want it or not, it is good to come into the universality with our specificity and our diversity, but are we ready? Have we prepared to get into that universality? Today, content has become the key of everything. So the discussion and debate is still open. All of the proposals you have made on consultation and so on, normally we should consult. What we are doing should be inclusive. Such is not yet the case, but we are evolving. The African Union is working in that direction. For example, the very first time that I wanted to make a declaration on internet governance, we posted it on a public website. It was the very first time in the African Union that a document that was posted on the public for discussion. But the debate remains open. Having IDs, yeah, it could be a solution as it could not be a solution. When communists were sent to Mongolia, for instance, they found that there was a lot of segregation in Mongolia, that they were calling somebody a son of a bastard and so on and so forth. So what did Stalin do? He said there will be no family name or surname. You have only a first name. And that made it possible for all of Mongolia to live, to emerge from feudalism. When Stalin fell, the Mongolian government became free, and they were asking who would like to give a family name to their children, and people started choosing family names, and 90% of the people chose to have Jewish names. Now you need to find out what that means. So those are things that happen, and it's good to point this out. So the issue of ID is a very critical one. What is certain is that whatever the pathway, whatever the structure that will be adopted, data should not be used to kill, for segregation, or to deny other people their rights. That's the issue. Concerning the Malabo Convention, the Malabo Convention has noble and wonderful principles, but why are people not adopting Malabo? I come back to what I said earlier, that we have not yet understood the issue of security in respect of the world in which we live today. That is the real problem. If in actual fact, in a country, we have all what we can call digitalization and so on, the issue of security will emerge and will need regulations. Sadly, but since all of this has not been understood, Malabo is still in the shelves. That is my personal understanding. However, once more, we can have 1,000 explanations that are even worse than what I said. But I think in particular that we have not yet understood the link between technology and the issues of security that go with it. Thank you.
Je crois qu'il y a plus de questions.
I think there's no other question.
Just very quickly, part of my response to some of your comments, even though weren't directed at me, is the importance of transparency. And I'd also like to clarify that from a Digital Center of Excellence at UNECA, we believe and we're advocating the principles of good digital ID as one of the key solutions to identification. Again, it wouldn't be the only one, okay? And I'll go back, and I'll probably do so several times today, on the issue of inclusivity. A lot of the examples we're giving here show how information is being used to exclude or inappropriately identify somebody, etc. Part of the principles of good ID, which actually make it quite challenging in terms of real implementation, is the inclusivity. So transparency is very important. One of the things that I think digital technology gives us the ability to do is, and there was a very fantastic question here, can you have an ID without a name? I would suggest the answer is yes, absolutely. Why? As you remember the previous example I gave, supposing we issue people with random numbers, right? Random 12-digit number. That number does not say anything about your age, your location, your ethnicity, or anything else. And I'll come to the second part in a moment, right? Now, authentication would simply be against that number and a certain number of fields that say either you're eligible for a benefit or you're not. You're a citizen or you're not. And of course, it'd have to be rules and governance about who could ask the question, but the response would be simply a yes or no, okay? In which case, you know, you go for a particular service that you're entitled to, you authenticate, whether it's biometric or with an additional PIN, and it would query the database and simply say, yes, you're eligible for that service. No other information needs to be given. Doesn't matter whether your age or your race or your sex or your nationality or your whatever else, whatever service you're asking for, if you meet that criteria, it simply comes back with a positive or it says no and doesn't give any other information as to why you're not eligible. So I think it is possible. There's still challenges and there's still the underlying question of, well, what information is collected behind in the database? Could that be hacked, etc.? But these are certainly solvable problems. I think the issues that we have are not so much technology, but the actual policy and the consultation and the question of what do we want as individuals and societies and members of our country. Thank you.
We'll quickly come to this side and again, please make your comments very.
Keda, I have had my hand for the whole time.
Let me come to this side first, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
These guys also had their hands up. So I'll start with you, three colleagues this side.
Okay.
Please go ahead quickly and.
Okay. Like we all know that we are in the age of AI and machine learning and all of that. Now, identity is a very important thing when it comes to data sets that are being collected for the use of AI. Now, Moctar actually said that bulk of the devices that are used in Africa, about 75% of them are probably produced by a company in China, which in other words, might probably have some form of government influence. Now, we've also known, sorry, I'm not throwing shades at a particular government, right? So we also know that this government is notorious for government surveillance in some particular issues. Now, I'm looking at the intersection of me giving out my own identity and for the, let's say, proposed unified identity, right? And then in some way, China already has it. And because there are some cameras which they could hack into, I'm probably just in a way saying that probably the incident that happened at AU sometime back, what gives me that assurance that my identity is protected if I have to give my identity to the unified stuff? What gives me the assurance that it is well protected and that it won't be used for AI, given the fact that data sets for Africans are really very scarce? I'm sure you agree with that. So what gives me the assurance that it won't be used?
Okay. Next. Let me also remind you, colleagues, that this session was just a teaser. So we have more and more issues that are related to some of these questions. So please just Mozilla and then the two other colleagues.
Good morning, Yochai Ben-Avi from Mozilla. Tunde, you talk about ID as empowering, as inclusive, and you hold up the Aadhaar in India as an example. But I would ask, what is empowering or inclusive about people dying from starvation, literally, because they did not have an Aadhaar? I would ask you, your principles mention privacy, but you seem to be very dismissive of this, to suggest that this can be figured out later in the name of ID first. Privacy must be built into the system from the very beginning, right? We have seen how things can go awry when we don't care about protecting the rights of people in the first instance. We must pay special attention in particular to marginalized communities who are most in need of protection. Even those least among us the hungry, the poor, are deserving of dignity, are deserving of autonomy. And that is why we need strong laws in place to protect those people. That is how we empower them. Data protection law offers an opportunity to provide obligations on the people who process the data of individuals. We need data protection law to empower strong independent regulators who can ensure that those rights are protected, are enforced. Saying that we can work this out later is not viable. We must protect everyone. You've mentioned, and we've discussed here today, other European ID systems. But what's notable is that all of those European countries that have ID systems already have data protection laws in place to ensure the protection of the rights and interests of all individuals. And then I think finally, while we can recognize the importance of legal ID, we must ask also, is digital ID necessary? Is the biometric ID necessary in order to realize the benefits of legal ID? Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My question is directed to Moctar. And naturally, we people like free services usually. We like free services, right? And earlier you said we are not customers, rather products. What do you suggest to align these two things, like free service? For example, in those countries like ours, well, we don't find resources and services freely, even in a nice way. So that, what is your suggestion to align these two problems, like the free service and the privacy? That's my question. Thank you.
Ramon Biao du Bénin.
Ramon Biao from Benin. We are talking about identity, and with its closeness to digital, I would want to tackle it from a different angle, especially where we raise a lot of issues on the data collection. What is the situation about the identification, the situation today, the identity of a person without collecting data? What I want to say is that with the artificial intelligence, there are more major groups dealing with a collection of data identification, even with SIM cards, with other elements. On the other side of this, the information, where are they stocked? And today, how do we, as African countries, we are capable of having a major force for discussions with these major groups that you already know on the data that are collected or which are deduced smartly with digital. For the case of my country, I come from Benin. I know that Benin would not have a way to discuss with an American group on the data collection of Beninese. On the contrary, within ECOWAS, maybe in the African Union, it may be timely to have a stronger voice. And that is where the issue, my question is being addressed to Moctar. What is done today for harmonization of figures on figures, regulation of data, and etc.? I read some regulations on countries. There are some divergences depending on the country. How can we get to a harmonization to be able to form a major group to be able to face the bigger ones, so that we will not just be doing things in conformity with other things, things that other countries are doing. And a country with about 10 million, 100 million, 5 million is marginalized. It's an issue that we don't need to lose sight of. Thank you.
Okay. Question one with regard to what is the proof. How can we make sure that vous avez parlé français ou vous avez parlé anglais? Je me rappelle même plus.
Maybe I'll speak French. We need to see, what is the guarantee? The data collector are not going to be abused. Indeed, there is no guarantee. there is no guarantee that your data, whatever be the data that is collected, because right from the time that you go into the cloud, it is very extremely important. Each time that you change a phone, in order for to get your data sent somewhere, there are things that we need to do. So the cloud is important for us for stocking of information, changing your telephone, and you're there. You become operational in less than a quarter of an hour, instead of taking 2 hours, 2 telephones and be transferring. There is no assurance on the fact that your data may not be used elsewhere. So that is a question. I don't have an answer to that. The only thing I can say is to think of count on the ethics and morals of people to say that data may not be abused. The second answer, Mazala made a good comment on. I support that. It's good. The issue on
services and privacy. I think if the going to free services is a price, you have to pay something. There is no free lunch. Believe me, in America we say there is no free lunch at all. And everywhere else, everybody who gives you something for free is expecting something. So if you don't want, if you're concerned by your privacy vis-a-vis to those who are providing free services, get your services. It's easy. You want to email, get your email. You want the domain name, get your domain. Your country code is good. Your CCTLD is good. You have now continental1.africa. You want, I mean, there is many options for you to use services that you pay for, sometimes not very, yes, sometimes they are not very good, sometimes they are very expensive, but again, it's a trade-off. You pick. This is where now you have to select. En ce qui concerne la collecte des informations, le stockage et...
With regard to collection of information, stockage, artificial intelligence, you are right. We need to have a harmonization of rules and regulations to enable us have only one block to be able to face certain situations. That is why Malabo, it took us 5 years to have that of Malabo, and it took us 4 years to get them adopted, and we are still to have time for it to be ratified, because not many countries have ratified, and it's since 2014. Now, if we adopt it, if our legislations, our laws right now, national levels come from the Malabo Convention, then we'll have some benefits that for the harmonization to be done. But we really, it has to be ratified that each country will incorporate it into our laws. That is when we can have a harmonized situation, and then we'll have one block. But the way is still ahead of us, and there are things we need to do. Thank you.
On the question of a potential unified ID, a lot of issues there. There may not be enough time to unpack. Basically, each country will make a decision on, and they already are. Obviously, many countries are already implementing a national ID. So the interest of the Center of Excellence involves harmonization, involves regulation, policy, to try and ensure or support that the programs that individual countries are implementing will be able to talk to and work with each other in this digital age and the age of e-commerce. So that is really our approach there. There's, as far as I know, no I think the AU may be looking at an African passport, if I recall correctly. My colleague can correct me, but I'm not sure that there's any significant effort to, or any effort that I know of that would be looking at a single identification for every single African. I stand to be corrected. On the importance of privacy and security, there is no agreement there, no disagreement, only a Freudian slip. But I was focusing on the technology, some of the technology aspects, as we're in a technology conference. But clearly, there is no point in implementing an ID that's going to violate people's rights, where there are not sufficient protections from a data protection agency, which we very much support. And if the legal and policy framework doesn't exist before an implementation, then we are in many cases going to make a bad situation even worse. Okay. Again, efforts on national IDs, and most of them have some sort of digital component, whether it's a chip on the card that is primarily useful in financial transactions, or whether there are other ways to do it. There are some tough choices that we have to make. And again, I would emphasize that for us in the Center of Excellence, the value of good ID has to have a social benefit and would not be a requirement that would deny anybody their rights or their protections. Finally, on the issue of biometrics, and we are in a technical conference, obviously you can have a digital ID without necessarily having biometrics. It would probably be much more expensive, and there are other issues involved, but you could do it via a series of other device. You could have a device or a token, you could have a PIN, you could do something on a mobile device, et cetera, et cetera. So biometrics, while is considered to be the normal standard for digital ID, there's nothing that says it has to be that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suggest that we break for coffee or a health break. I definitely need one. And then we come back after. We can squeeze the time. Instead of 30 minutes, we make it 20 minutes. So please, let's give another round of applause for the panel.